you're in for a bit of shock. We are now going from the very global picture to our what we call very small fish pond, the North Sea, a very small, shallow sea with high productivity. My name is Pim Visser. I'm Executive Officer of Visnet in the Netherlands, but also the President of the European Association of Fish Producer Organizations. Visnet is a national organization of regional producers, so we are very close to the fishermen in the fishing ports, and we have various areas of attention. My talk will now concentrate on what's happening on spatial planning, Natura 2000, etc., but the lessons we learned from the stakeholder engagement in these processes are applicable to all our policy areas. We are embedded in the two European organizations, which are Europesh and EAPO, which together represent about 10 member states fisheries organizations, representing about 45,000 fishermen, and with a total value of about landings of about 3 billion euros, all in more or less in the western part. All these operators have different types of vessels, very big ones, very small ones, but they have one thing in common: they are all operated by fishermen. And there is no such thing as an opposition or opposing views between large scales and small scales, because fishermen are fishermen, and we shouldn't emphasize the antagonism between the two. And when we talk about fishing policy, fisheries policy, spatial planning, etc., we should not forget that we are not talking about big business, we are not talking about on the stock markets. No, we are talking about fishermen and their families. They are all small and medium enterprises. They are most of the time all family businesses. And we are talking about supplying protein to the world, both to the lesser developed countries with the low value, high protein fish, such as the pelagic species, but we're also talking about providing fish to the Western European market with the high-end value of the other species. This is the traditional fishing area. It's a very clear picture. The sea is empty, and that's how it should be in the idea of fishermen. The sea is theirs. And in their ideas, the sea is still theirs. I showed you that it's the Dogger Bank, where we have three types of fisheries. We have the traditional beam trawl with tickler chains, twin-rigged otter trawls, and fly shoot fisheries, all for flatfish, all for high-valued flatfish. I mentioned these three species, these three types of fisheries, because in the policymakers, a fishing boat is a fishing boat, a gear is a gear, impact is impact. That's easy. But it's not easy, it's complex. The British and the Dutch fought their last war on the Dogger Bank in 1781, which is a very interesting piece of history because both won. But after that, the trade of the Dutch ceased, so the English were the real winners. But in 2010, another type of four nations war started on the Dogger Bank because it was about Natura 2000. And for the Dutch, it's part of what Paul just showed, the multiple use of the Dutch continental shelf. It's a very, very busy sea. You cannot compare it with large pieces of ocean. It's a very shallow sea. If you look at the map, and if you want, whenever you go to the deep in Hull, you will see a map of the North Sea and Europe and the continent, and you will see that the continent and the UK are linked. There's a very shallow 30-meter deep pond in between, which is called the North Sea, where the bisons and the elephants used to, or the elephants, well, they used to run there a few years ago. It's all about fishing on a square inch. Remember the old map, and we are now going to fishing on a square inch. The former Dutch Fish Product Board developed this idea about 10, 15 years ago, and it's true. But fishing cannot be on a square inch. It requires space. It's never subject to planning. It's not farming. It's not tourism. No, it's hunting. And what these fishermen want is to hunt. What they can do best is to hunt. And everybody who says fishermen should engage in fish farming, no, they're hunters. You never make a hunter a farmer. So let them do what they are best at. And because they are going to see every day, every week again, and every week is an adventure. What has the wind brought us? What has the tide brought us? And what are we going to catch this week? And fish are highly mobile. And if we close off areas, so if we say 30% of the sea should be closed, then the fisheries in that area will be displaced. And the displacement is an issue which needs to be taken in consideration. This is a map of VMS pings of the activities in the Dogger Bank area in the 2007-2009. We are now going to take decisions in 2016 based on the 2009 data, out data. And this is the Danish sand eel fisheries, which are also very important. From our perspective, from the Dutch perspective, I can show you the development of the beam trawl fleet in the 25 years. And we can also show you the development of the main target and bycatch species. The main species is sole, and you see that on the left-hand side, and you see the right-hand side is the spawning stock biomass of plaice, and we will need a bigger screen soon. And that is very good. But it has resulted in the fact that we are now only catching 65% of the quota. But in the same time, you see that the F has plummeted. So everybody happy, everybody well, we are very sustainable. So once we are there, they say now we can close off parts of the sea. The Dogger Bank process started, and I don't know whether you ever heard of Cristobal Colon, also known as Christopher Columbus, an adventurer, very courageous. When he left, he didn't know where he went to. When he arrived, he didn't know where he was. And when he came back, he had no idea where he had been. And that's about the analogy of the Dogger Bank process. It's the first Natura 2000 process in the economic zone. It started in 2010. The Dutch had no legal basis, but they were sure they would get the legal basis within the process. Now, we are 5 years later, the legal basis is still lacking. We had some experience inside the 12 nautical miles, and we had a non-aggression pact with the NGOs. If in the Netherlands we had made an agreement about the fisheries and the fisheries impact with the NGOs, they would not oppose plans. But that was the Dutch approach. And that Dutch approach, we thought, would work in other countries as well. But that came out a bit differently. There was a bit of experience in the Wadden Sea, which led to the famous Wadden Sea ruling of the Luxembourg Court of Justice. And in the meantime, the Germans carried out their MSEAS project before 28. Probably the outcomes were not very positive. We have never heard of it since. But it has created a hidden agenda in the German mind, which was totally embedded in their process, which I am to describe. And the UK was first in designation, and the Danish said to Dogger Bank, oh no, that's not qualifying. So we have the Dutch, who had no legal basis and a bit of experience, the Germans with experience and a hidden agenda, the UK who was to start, and the Danish who said, we don't care. So the Dogger Bank process, but the fishermen are fishing on the entire Dogger Bank, so they want one management system. So the Center for Marine Policy, where Martin Pastorius was then the director, recognized this problem. And the North Sea Advisory Council brought the matter up, and the Dutch took the initiatives. But what we, in hindsight, this is all wisdom in hindsight. What we in hindsight found out, we had running trains. The trains were on different tracks. Their locomotives had different voltages, and all of them had Columbus in the driving seat. As I said, it's wisdom in hindsight, and I'll tell you more about this later. Making mistakes is only human, but not learning from mistakes is absolutely stupid. So total equality management is based about admitting mistakes. And once you've admitted your first mistake, the second is much easier. And let us prevent making mistakes again. So we shouldn't be afraid of admitting that we've made mistakes, but we must prevent them. So our mistakes were that we made many beginners' mistakes. We grossly overestimated our own capabilities of engaging in such a process. The North Sea Advisory Council was totally not geared to engage in such a process. We were saved by the Center of Marine Policy and its MapsNose project. They had capabilities, they had money, so they helped us out. Had they not been there, it would have been a total failure. And Columbus, he was constantly present. We as an industry, we needed far too many steps to get to where we wanted to be. And we could not react adequately. We had NGOs in the table, and we had Greenpeace on the phone. So when the NGOs were talking on the table, they said, I have to take a break. Then they went to the corridor, phoned Greenpeace, what do you think about it? And then they came back. That's not a way of how you could deal about these things. On the other hand, we need in these processes scientific rationale. And that was totally lacking. On no scientific grounds, the government said we need to close about 25 to 55%. If you add 25 and 55, you'll get 80, so 40 is in the middle. Guess where they ended? This was a his master's voce approach from civil servants talking what politicians wanted to hear. That's not a scientific basis for things. And the process was led by a very high-level retired ICES official, which gave a lot of confusion because the man was retired, but he was referred to as ICES. And ICES also had a role in the process, and that was a total confusing situation. It would have been much better had we started simple, had we started with a risk-based approach. And we needed international data gathering. We had a third-party scientific evaluation, which we wanted to insert from the industry into the ICES evaluation process. But then the government said, you're 5 days too late. And the third-party scientific evaluation by the School of Ocean Sciences in Wales said, it appears that the way the work was done appeared subjective, not repeatable and meaningless. Well, that was a good excuse that we were 5 days late. We had a stakeholder engagement experience where we, as in the North Sea Advisory Council, with NGOs for 30% and industry for 70%, failed to come to an agreement. Because we had we started, but we had no set of planning, we had no idea, and we had no criteria, and the criteria changed. In the meantime, there was Natura 2000, there was wind farms, there's a lot of complex, I shouldn't use the word complex, but there's a lot of complex things happening together. And everybody should be at the table. We shouldn't have telephone. The lessons, because that's the important thing. Criteria must be objective. So you know what you're dealing with, it's yes or no, then it's simple. And they must have a rigorous analysis of evidence. We need scientific basis. And we need results-based management. On the other hand, fishers' knowledge is crucial. Fishers' information needs to be bought in. The fishermen are the only real stakeholder. It's their livelihood, it's their income which is at stake. On the other hand, fishermen must be told that they cannot have everything their way. I showed you the 18th century map with the empty seas. Those days are gone. We're living in 2016, so the fishermen must face up to reality, but they must be engaged. And if the NGOs are engaged, their information should be limited to the ecological aspects. They don't know about the livelihood of fisheries. NGOs have absolutely no clue about the economics of fisheries. So they shouldn't tell us what the fishing industry needs to do. We have no clue about how to get money from Pew, etc. So we won't tell them how to get money from Pew, and they will not tell us how to get money from the fish. So they should engage in their own way. And we should engage with the NGOs from an industry point of view in a very mature way, which we, although I might be a bit, what am I? But we are seriously talking to the NGOs, and that needs to be done vice versa.
2 minutes, please.
The percentage, it was a discussion about percentages. How many percents are we going to close? I'll jump to our lessons learned. We must be prepared. We must know what we are beginning at. We must not make any more mistakes at the beginning because these mistakes are killing for the process. And expectations management with fishes is important. And we should engage our own science and our own scientists from the beginning. Because on the Dogger Bank we ended with a percentage, but at the wrong place. The only way forward is that we are looking at a plethora of proposals from the Natura 2000, from the European Framework Directive, and wind farms. And NGOs and fishing industry need in these discussions sing from the same page. Are areas a sustainable source of protein to feed the world, or are we looking for wilderness? And if we don't finalize that discussion, then we will have parallel monologues for the rest of the time. And the fishing industry, we must engage in all processes, because we need to stress the balance between food and nature. We need to keep our fishers motivated, and fishing industry needs to invest in their own scientific capabilities, and we need to do that from our perspective on a European scale and work together internationally. And these are lessons learned from the spatial planning, but they are also applicable to all the other areas of interest for the fishing industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pim.